For the last 4 years, the media told Americans that Donald Trump, the evil orange man, was a bully, a chauvinist, and a pig with absolutely no integrity. But 4 years later, after an Emmy Award, a book deal, and 15,000 dead, we do have a politician that fits that description. And his name is not Donald John Trump, it's Andrew Mark Cuomo. The media spent years telling us how bad Donald Trump was, and they spent the last year telling us that true leadership during this deadly pandemic could be found in Albany, New York, not in Washington, D.C. That Andrew Cuomo, the love gov, who made 9 truly wonderful appearances with his kid brother Chris on CNN, was America's true leader. My, what a difference a year makes. Today, it's clear that Andrew Cuomo is a fraud, a bully, a punchline, and now forever, a cautionary tale. Andrew Cuomo is what the media tried to convince us that Donald Trump was for 4 years. And eventually, Cuomo is going to be forced to resign. It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but eventually. The man the left loved to love, their hero, along with Dr. Tony Fauci, the faces of this terrible pandemic, are now both jokes, and one could end up in jail. Rachel's with us right now. She's got something fun as well. Q of the D.
Thanks, Rob. Yes, we have our question of the day. Who was glorious, victorious, and notorious all at the same time? Well, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who would have turned 88 today. President Bill Clinton nominated Ginsburg as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court on June 22, 1993, to fill the seat vacated by retiring Justice Byron White. Ginsburg became a feminist icon for her legal successes in cases that advance women's rights. She died on September 18th after a long battle with cancer. And on the night of her passing, Donald Trump was campaigning in Minnesota, where his reaction showed one of the most poignant moments of his presidency. Take a listen.
She just died? Wow. I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time. She led an amazing life. What else can you say? She was an amazing woman. Whether you agreed or not, she was an amazing woman who led an amazing life. I'm actually sad to hear that. I am sad to hear that. Thank you very much.
You probably remember that moment. Well, wow. Ginsburg's popularity reaching cult-like status in the final years of her life as people began to refer to her as the notorious RBG, a play on words, of course, comparing her to hip-hop legend Notorious B.I.G., who also hailed from Brooklyn, which is where on Friday a bronze statue of Ginsburg was unveiled in her honor, the date chosen to commemorate her birthday and Women's History Month. So in all, big up to Brooklyn and R.I.P. to RBG.
I don't want to sentimentalize Donald Trump 54 days after he left office, but just, that was a moment of grace and bipartisanship there. RBG and DJT did not get along. Right. DJT was not a fan of hers.
But something he said, regardless, politics aside, she did amazing things for women. She was an amazing woman and led an incredible life. Yeah. So regardless of whether they agreed or not. And
he was just getting that news from a reporter there. So that was all, that was all. He was just hearing that for the first time, and that was his genuine reaction.
Mr. President, do you think Governor Andrew Cuomo should resign?
I think the investigation is underway and we should see what it brings us.
Hello, interesting moment. Late yesterday afternoon, that's President Joe Biden. He had just gotten off Marine One. He spent a weekend at his home in Delaware, and he walked over to the press gaggle and he answered a question. And he said he does not think that Andrew Cuomo should resign until the investigation is complete. Interesting to hear that. Welcome into Wake Up America. I'm Rob Finnerty.
And I'm Rachel Rollar. Rob, I also found it interesting that was the question the reporters were asking.
Well, I mean, these reporters, Rachel, 54 days, he hasn't answered questions from the press.
That's what I'm saying.
They've got so many questions to ask. I was surprised that he walked over and took a question and then quickly walked away.
Right, with everything going on. Here's some of the stories we're following. That one in detail. The president finally addressing the Cuomo scandal from the White House lawn after multiple Democrats have demanded the governor's resignation following that now 7th allegation of sexual misconduct. Plus the crisis at the border. Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling it a humanitarian challenge, putting the blame on the previous administration. And also, we are midway through Women's History Month, and we've been celebrating all month long, but several women making history at the Grammys last night. It was quite a ladies' night. If anything, Rob, if you didn't watch it, if you're not into the Grammys, it was a big moment for women, I will say. It's usually a show that is dominated by male winners, so It was cool.
Not the case this year. That is pretty cool. I absolutely love music. I didn't watch much of the Grammys yesterday. The whole daylight savings has got me all thrown off.
That and the fact that there's no audience.
You know, I'm reading my son a book last night, and it's broad daylight. He's 2 years old, and the whole time I'm reading it, he's looking up at me like, what are we doing?
It's like nap time?
Don't try this with me. I know what's happening. So that's kind of where I am with that. But you'll have more on the Grammys in just a little bit. Excited about that. The Andrew Cuomo situation has spiraled completely out of control. If you weren't keeping up with this over the weekend, a seventh woman has now come forward accusing the governor of sexual harassment as top Democrats and Republicans in New York and Washington and all around the country continue to call for the governor to resign. Joining us this morning for more on all of this, New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney and State Senator James Tedisco. We appreciate you both being with us. Thank you so much for your time. This story, every morning I wake up and I think that I'm not going to be met with a new headline, and every day there's something new. Congresswoman Tenney, why don't we start with you? I want to play you a bit of sound from Speaker Pelosi over the weekend talking about the governor's situation. Take a listen.
What I said at the time that these revelations came forward, I said what these women have said must be treated with respect. They are credible and serious charges. And then I called for an investigation. I have confidence in the Attorney General of New York. She has called for I think, expeditious investigation. And again, with all the respect in the world for what these women have come forth and said.
And I noticed both of you were chuckling. I'm right there with you. It seems to get more and more ridiculous. But Congresswoman, New York's vaccine czar, Larry Schwartz, has reportedly been making phone calls. He apparently was doing this over the weekend, calling state officials, asking them, sort of threatening them to support Governor Andrew Cuomo. My question to you, are voters finally getting a glimpse of the real Andrew Cuomo here?
Oh, yes. This has been and welcome to my colleague who was in the Assembly with me before he served in the Senate, Jim Tedesco. We've lived through Governor Cuomo. We thought Spitzer was bad, but now we've got Cuomo, who is really had 11 years of abuse. And I laugh when people talk about Larry Schwartz. I haven't heard what he said, but I was kicked out of the governor's mansion for almost kicked out if I were to put on a pink hat that had the Remington Arms logo on it because they were so against gun rights for citizens across New York after they passed the SAFE Act, which took away gun rights from New Yorkers.
Right.
But yeah, this is nothing new. Nancy Pelosi is also part of the let's focus on the sexual harassment. Let's investigate, which, by the way, is serious. There's now 7 accounts. Nobody cares about what Tamara Reid has to say, who has made credible charges against Joe Biden. But Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about it either, which at least shows he's a little bit self-aware. But this is really about the nursing home scandal and cover-up and years of abuses of power from Governor Cuomo. I called for his resignation back in 2014 after he covered up and tried to shut down his own anti-corruption commission that he set up and tried to shut it down when it got too close to him.
We had Tara Reid on the show not long ago. She, just like most of these accusers with Governor Cuomo, are credible. She worked in Senator Biden's office. I believe 6 of the 7 Cuomo accusers worked in his office in Albany. These are credible accusations. Senator, I want to bring in you. You said that Governor Cuomo and former Governor Eliot Spitzer are cut from the same cloth. What do you mean by that? And do you expect the governor to resign before any of these investigations wrap up? He's got 2 going on right now.
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say this is becoming more and more absurd. I've said it before and I'll say it again. This governor has more angles than a geometry book, more excuses for these things that he's done, the investigations and the scandals. Now, yesterday you saw, and this is why he's similar to his previous governor, he's a bully. It's his way or the highway. But yesterday, his excuse was, it's the counterculture, and I'm not a part of the political club or team.
Right.
Now, this is a man who was the campaign manager for his father, Mario Cuomo, for 3 terms. He was married to a Kennedy. There's nobody who's more a part of the political club. You know, this is the NCAA tournament coming up where they used to use the 4 corners stall ball game. They can't do that anymore because there's a 24-point clock. Well, for the last 8 to 10 months, as the Congresswoman said, we've been calling for resignation. And when he said that he wouldn't resign. We said we have to impeach him because certainly you believe he can't serve. He's lost the trust of the public in us. Now we have our colleagues in the New York State Assembly would say, we want resignation, but we have to study impeachment.
Right.
Study impeachment, not impeach this governor. And this governor needs to be impeached. I mean, the facts are pretty clear about this whole thing. So this looks like it might be stall ball. This looks like it might be a whitewash. The Judiciary Committee, which is totally controlled by the Democrats, progressives in the Assembly, are going to study this. Are they going to study it for 3 or 4 months and then let him consolidate his power, circle the wagons of support around him? We have a budget to do. It's an $180 billion budget.
Right.
We not only have to vanquish this COVID virus, but we have to start up our economy. And by the way, our economy was floundering under his control. We had a $6 billion deficit before this pandemic hit us. For the last 3 years, we've been #1 in out-migration with people walking out of the state. My goodness. We won't be the empire state anymore. We'll be the empty state.
Oh, well,
our slogan used to be, I love New York. It's fast becoming, I leave New York.
What has happened to New York, Senator, it is sad.
They're both bullies.
It's very sad. I agree with you. It's very sad what's happened to New York and to New York City in particular. Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi over the weekend said that Cuomo, and I thought this was something to chuckle at, she said Cuomo should look inside his heart when it comes to resigning. Joe Biden and Andrew Cuomo could be cut from the same cloth when it comes to this kind of harassment. I don't understand why they would try and protect him, Biden and Pelosi at this point. Why not just call for his resignation and join the more than 100 New York lawmakers that are doing that right now?
I think that they don't want the focus to be on the nursing home scandal and the abuses of power in the past. But, if we get to the nursing home scandal, they want to clean this up before we get to turning out that other governors like Gretchen Whitmer, Murphy, Wolf, Gavin Newsom used many of the same policies that Andrew Cuomo used that were deadly and hurt nursing homes. They don't want that to be involved. Let's waste a lot of time dealing with the nursing home scandal until they figure out exactly which deck of cards they want to deal. Who is going to be the governor? This is all political maneuvering behind the scenes by the Democrats. And Pelosi obviously is the top of it. I would argue she's one of the most powerful people in the country right now, all because the Democrats allow her to be. She really doesn't deserve to be in that position, but they don't act. And it's very similar to how they used to be in Albany. And now here they are. The guy who runs the show is now beleaguered. And now what do? And they're not sure exactly. If the Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, brought impeachment articles to the floor, he would be impeached because everyone follows the Speaker. And Jim is a former Assembly member. He knows that. And they're afraid to do that because they're afraid if he gets impeached, guess what happens under New York law? It's not like the federal law. Andrew Cuomo gets removed and Kathy Hochul, the lieutenant governor, becomes the acting governor of New York. And he's in purgatory at that point. What does he do?
Right.
And they're all worried about, they're maneuvering right now. I think he should just resign and save us all the agony.
Yeah, and not even make the promise that he won't run again for a 4th term in 2022. Senator, I want to squeeze one in. We're super tight on time, but do you think that lives would have been saved if the media, particularly some of the left-leaning media, would have reported more on the governor's executive order that he signed a year ago? It was March 25th, 2020, that he signed that order putting COVID-positive nursing home patients back in nursing homes.
Without question. That's why we think he has to be impeached. When he gave that executive order and we saw the people begin to pass and we said, this doesn't make any sense, common sense or logic, he hid those numbers. He hid those numbers because he was embarrassed by them. He hid them because he wanted to be the individual who vanquished COVID, and he didn't want those numbers to come out. But the worst tragedy is, and the saddest thing is, he was writing a book.
Right.
And it didn't fit his narrative for that book.
And he won an
so
Emmy.
He let all these people die along the wayside. And for that reason, and for the harassment reason, he deserves to be impeached. And we can't let them delay this thing and encircle the wagons to try to run the clock out on this.
You can't buy 6 Dr. Seuss books on eBay, but you can still buy Governor Cuomo's sham of a book right now.
Not too many people are going to do that, though. They'll get the Seuss book somehow. They won't get his book.
I agree with you. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney and State Senator James Tedesco, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We appreciate it. Great information. Time for the gift that literally keeps on giving. On Friday, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki gave us another one when she was asked about New York Governor Andrew Cuomo resigning in today's second Psaki Dodge.
The president believes that every woman who's come forward, there have now been 6, I believe, who have come forward, deserves to have her voice heard, should be treated with respect, and should be able to tell her story. There also is an independent investigation that is ongoing, of course, in the state with subpoena power overseen by the Attorney General, and he certainly supports that moving forward. We, of course, have watched the news of a number of lawmakers call for that, but I don't have any additional announcements from here.
All right, for more on all this, I want to welcome in our panel this morning. We have our White House correspondent, Emerald Robinson, back with us here in the 8 o'clock hour. Former Nevada State GOP chairwoman Amy Tarkanian with us. Political analyst Mark Halperin is here, and the founding editor of Mediaite, Colby Hall, back with us this morning as well. Mark, I was trying to look for some historical precedents. I don't know if you are aware of any, but over 100 elected officials in the state of New York, many Democrats, are now calling for Andrew Cuomo to resign. He said on Friday that he is not going to step down. He's going to wait till the investigations are over. He's being investigated on 2 different fronts. Has this happened before? Are you aware of something in recent history where a local lawmaker has had this much going against him and has just refused to step down?
Well, Rob, probably the best recent parallel is the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, who's still in office,
Right.
even though many people across the state, including his state's 2 senators, both Democrats, like in New York, called for him to resign. Not only did he not resign, he now is being endorsed by, basically, his legislative agenda being endorsed by those who called for him to resign. And he's endorsing many of the people and campaigning for many of the people who tried to get him out. So I think Andrew Cuomo is relying a bit on that precedent. And it's interesting. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, they're amongst the few senior Democrats who haven't called for him to step down. And I think one big question that they've not yet to be asked and answered is what separates their judgment from all the others who have said Cuomo should go?
Yeah, and he's dug his heels in. Emerald, it seems like, this recall effort in California with Gavin Newsom, I mean, they have the signatures. They got the 1.5 million signatures needed. And that should be a red flag, because that's a massively Democratic state out there. I believe 2/3 of voters are Democratic. Do you think that Democrats might be trying to clear the runway for Kamala in 2024 by getting rid of Andrew Cuomo and getting rid of Gavin Newsom?
Well, as far as Gavin Newsom goes, Californians are really upset with him, and it's not just Republicans. I talk to a lot of Californians. As you know, I have a lot of family in California who are vote Democrat. And they've been very upset with how Newsom has handled the pandemic, and then paired that with what they saw in the hypocrisy with the French Laundry. The French Laundry photos were pretty damaging to him. So his voters are upset with him. Now, will Democrats take advantage of that? Will Kamala Harris ultimately take advantage of that? Probably, because Newsom and Cuomo were names that have been mentioned as possible contenders in the future. And
Right.
Kamala Harris, before becoming the VP nominee under Biden, was not very popular. She could not stand on her own, as we saw in the primaries. And they're doing a whole campaign for her now. I walked into a bookstore and there's just Kamala Harris everywhere, which it is Women's History Month. But she just doesn't come across very warm and fuzzy or likable to voters.
And you make a good point. She was not popular in her own state.
Not at all.
Yeah. Colby, I want to talk about what we saw over the weekend. We saw more rioting, more violence, more looting. We saw more of those fires that we saw over the summer, particularly in Portland. There is an autonomous zone that's being established in Minneapolis as we wait for the start of the Derek Chauvin trial. Antifa members attacked a federal courthouse in Portland over the weekend and set fires. Now, do you think under the Biden administration's current, what they call domestic terrorism, would that qualify as domestic terrorism?
It should, and I guess it remains to be seen. I guess, we saw that happening under the Trump administration. We're seeing it under the Biden administration. I thought one of the more interesting things that come out of the most recent unrest in Portland is the mayor of Portland, who had previously been sort of hands-off and very sort of supportive of the protesters, or rather didn't want to get very involved, is now taking a very different tone. He's basically calling for more sort of military, or rather police force. So this whole idea of defunding the police has now gone awry, and saying, you know what, I think we got it wrong. So credit to him, at least for course correcting and admitting that he had it wrong to begin with. But he did get it wrong to begin with. So, it'll be very interesting. I suspect that the Biden administration will do another Psaki dodge, as you already said, and say, oh, it's a local issue. We'll let them deal with it. And it will continue to go unabated.
I get more feedback, by the way, Colby, from the Psaki dodges than pretty much anything else.
It's the push zoom. You do the push zoom, and that's the
right.
chef's kiss.
That's it. Thank you. Amy, nice to see you again. I appreciate you getting up early with us. I know you're in Nevada. This trial is going to start. It's still on schedule to start at the end of the month. The Derek Chauvin trial. What's interesting here is a lot of these jurors are being asked questions that we've never really seen before. They're being asked their thoughts on Black Lives Matter, on Minneapolis police, on Blue Lives Matter. Do you think there's going to be violence as we head into the summer again, no matter what the verdict is in this case?
I do. And we actually saw some of that take place yesterday with the one-year anniversary of the death of Breonna Taylor. And it's unfortunate because you have these so-called activists that are, instead of wanting to discuss possible police reform and discuss, if there is systemic racism within the police force or not, they are using violence. And I am from Nevada, but right now I'm currently in the San Diego area. And we did have protests in the Hollywood area, and they vandalized buildings and created chaos. And it actually happened in a number of major cities across the nation. And so the fact that the liberals are so good at dividing us, whether it be, with sex, race, gender, religion, politics, it's a shame because these are some important discussions that I think we need to have.
Amy, you make many good points there. Mark, I want to get your reaction because the Biden administration has been essentially mute on anything that Antifa has done, Black Lives Matter, and the violence this weekend. It was just like the stuff we saw in June and July.
Joe Biden denounced it during the campaign under a little bit of pressure. And as president, we haven't heard from him now. What Biden folks will tell you is they don't like to talk about anything except their main priorities. And that's not a main priority for them. But I think that just as was true during the campaign, he's got responsibility more so now to speak out. And, he's going to have to be asked about it because I don't think they'll do it on their own.
Well, I wish he would, Emerald. It's ironic that the first city to try and defund the police was the city of Minneapolis. All right, Portland then followed. Minneapolis a month ago asked for $6 million to try and attract and recruit new young cadets because guess what? As a result of what happened this summer and the lack of support that law enforcement got, nobody wants to be a police officer there, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, and in New York as well. They've seen their numbers. The NYPD has really seen their numbers dwindle as well. Look, I asked Jen Psaki about their feelings on the violence and unrest in the Northwest a few weeks ago, especially as it relates to the definition of domestic terrorism, which you asked Colby about. And it would have been a good candidate for your Psaki dodge, because that's basically what she did when I asked. And as Mark said, it's not a priority for them to talk about. They risk alienating the further left wing of their party if they do definitively condemn this violence in Antifa. And so you see them giving blanket responses that are not specific when pointedly asked about that violence in particular.
Well, by the way, back to the Psaki dodge, she gives us so much good material. We are literally, we've got more sound cut than we can use. Mark, I did get you a little treat the next time you're in our Newsmax studios, if you can see. These are Cracker Jacks in honor of the Texas Rangers announcing that they're going to allow full fans at their new stadium. So I'll let you open it up to find.
What's the expiration date on that box, Rob?
This is this is new, 1994. But I'll let you open it up for the prize inside. Colby, really enjoyed having you on. Come back and be a panelist again. Good stuff today. Amy, as always. By the way, Amy, you're in California. That means it's 5:23 in the morning there. So you are the trooper of the day. We appreciate it. Thank you for waking up. You look great, Emerald.
I enjoy it.
We love having you on. Thank you, Emerald. As always, good seeing you. We'll see you guys again tomorrow.
Perhaps the most shocking headline over the weekend, Meghan Markle reportedly considering a run for president, meeting with top Democrats. First, is that even real? And second, how would the royal family feel about that?
It is real. It's absolutely real. Meghan Markle is very ambitious. And I say that with total respect. She knows what she wants in life. She's a go-getter. My goodness, she married the most eligible bachelor probably on the planet. So she knows how to make stuff happen. She's been very involved in politics. During the election, the royal family, who never, ever speak about politics. In fact, The Queen has never voted in a British election. She stays out of it that much. They were horrified that Meghan was speaking out, but she's young and determined, and she's an American. It's her right to speak out about her passions. I think this could happen. The one thing about her, though, that I think is going to hold her back is, surprisingly, she has a very thin skin. And as we know from politics, it's a rough business, and Meghan does not like to be criticized. She's not even happy about the press criticizing her with Harry. We saw that on the Oprah interview. Can you imagine?
I was going to say, can you imagine the presidential criticism that comes that way?
It's too rough. It's really, really rough. And we're part of that too. We have a lot to say about this stuff. So I'm not sure that she's up for that, but she does have ambitions. It's absolutely true.
All right, but it is true. You've given me so much this morning, Rob Shooter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Take care. It's always a pleasure.
Well, the final episode of HBO's 4-part docuseries Allen vs. Farrow aired last night, and we were brought to the present after uncovering explosive sexual assault allegations surrounding director Woody Allen concerning then 7-year-old daughter Dylan Farrow. So to talk about it, let's bring in psychologist Dr. Catherine Coleman. Welcome back to Wake Up America.
Thanks, Rachel.
Now, Dr. Coleman, in this final episode, we were introduced to Dylan's husband, her daughter. We saw a shaking Dylan. How traumatizing do you think it was, even though so much time has passed, for her to actually go back and replay those events and knowing that the spotlight this docuseries would be under?
Well, I think it's hugely traumatic. I also think that this may have been really healing for her. Remember, this is a person who, when they were 7 years old, brought about these allegations. Nothing came of it, although it was in the news quite a bit. She brought them back up in 2014 and felt unheard. She brought them back up in 2018, and finally this started to get some traction, and now she finally gets to share her story, and she kind of gets to come out on the other side. And so I think that she really wins in this.
And you know, when she did bring them back up during the Me Too movement, it was almost as if Woody Allen still got away unscathed. So much support for him, and actors and celebrities kind of saying they didn't want to get involved in the conversation, which was rare to see. Now, his supporters still taking aim at the filmmakers for not including his perspective, they say. They're calling it a hatchet job. Directors, on the other hand, say they tried to get in touch with him. They used his perspective through statements and his testimony. What are your thoughts on that?
They tried to get his perspective. They never responded. They do include his perspective by including some of his nothing apropos, his memoir. They included some of that in the bit. Quite frankly, I don't really care about his perspective at this point. This was in the news so much back in the early 90s, and he had got to share his perspective then. He was giving pressers then about how he didn't do anything, about how this was all Mia, and feeling scorned as a woman and making up these allegations. So I think his perspective has been heard.
And it's interesting you say that. I saw a lot of that online as well, of people saying that. However, HBO offering a 5th episode. The directors are saying there's a standing offer to interview Woody if he ever wanted to do it. And they'll just air his side of the story pretty much in sense. But Dylan is describing the long-term impact of the actions of what she described in this last episode as a lifelong sentence. Now, you talked a bit about this might have been healing for her. Do you think for other women that are watching it, it's not just her going through a situation like this. Many women can relate to something like this and maybe have been silent their entire lives. Do you think that will help them move on?
I hope so. The reality is that when you experience childhood sexual abuse, you can never unsee what you saw. You can never unhear what you heard, or, forget what you experienced. And so that really lives within you the rest of your life. And, she described this in the docuseries about how difficult it was for her with relationships, that she had a boyfriend, and even the thought of kissing him or being sexual with him was difficult because of what Woody had put her through. And that's what you see a lot of the times with these childhood sexual abuse victims, is that it's very difficult for them to form meaningful relationships. Either they have no desire to be romantic at all, or they go the complete opposite way and become a little bit promiscuous as an attempt to regain control.
Right. And we're also hearing now this term parental alienation syndrome. It was something that came out after last night's episode. I'm seeing a lot of it circling online, in headlines, on social media. As a psychologist, they're saying that this is being used as a tool of accused abusers in court cases. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so the term parental alienation really came about. It's a made up term. There's absolutely no science behind this term. And it was a way to excuse behavior and kind of, it is gaslighting at its finest, basically. It's a way of blaming the victim for what they endured. And so this is a term that is still today thrown around in the courtroom. And the docuseries did show a lot of women who had accused partners of sexually abusing their children, and then as a result of this accusation, then had their custody rights taken away. And so that is the result of these claims of parental alienation, and it's not a real thing.
Interesting. And of course, we saw Dylan say she wished she had testified. She felt like she had a moment. She let it pass. But her story is getting heard now for sure. So many people watching this HBO series. We know that there's going to be a podcast later this week, and perhaps that 5th episode. We'll just have to wait and see. Dr. Catherine Coleman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Rachel.
We'll be right back. You're watching Wake Up America only on Newsmax.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.